Salud. This whole thing of Jas Takhar and all the businesses, these guys don't give a shit.
What is it, Dad? What's going on?
Whoever came up with this, I want to speak to the person.
Alan was my boss's 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 boss.
We're always saying these sayings and these expressions. Like, what the hell does that mean?
You want to stop someone in the aisle? Spell it wrong. And then you leave the exam and you're like, that's sixth wine. What was it? They're like, oh, it was a French Pinot. Like, whoa! Thank you. Appreciate it
so much.
When you come on Thursdays, game one.
Because we all get to decide.
The business, the way to shoot the video.
Welcome to the Jas Takhar Podcast. And if you are watching the recording on YouTube, or maybe listening while you're taking your dog for a walk, or maybe on the treadmill, again, welcome. I think this is number 2 episode for 2024, but I get it wrong all the times. If you're new to the world, make sure you go back because we have a little over 231 podcast discussions that I've done. And it's a myriad of talking to people from the world of investing into real estate, investing into mutual fund stocks. And if you're a real estate agent or a real estate professional, have you looked into what we're doing at From the Ground Up Academy? If you haven't, go do yourself a favor, because these other podcasts that I've had, I've got blessed and I'm lucky enough to be sitting down with business owners that are actually doing what we're hoping that you step into, which is the world of creating your life around, creating your business around your life rather than the other way around. And I'm proud to have my next guest, Mr. Andrew von Teichman, and I did not butcher that, right? Good. I've been practicing for a while.
Thank you.
But all joking aside, couple of things I want to make sure I point out to the guests, who and what you've done. And then if you don't mind, fill in the blanks where I might have got it wrong. Okay, Andrew? Designed the first e-commerce website in Canada as a student at University of Western. That's a wine distribution, was it
I was
site?
working at a winery,
Yeah.
and we started selling the winery's wines online. That was the first e-commerce website in Canada to do that.
It's interesting that you brought that up because I've also had a gentleman by the name of Gary V on, who's like really huge in the wine.
Gary's the man.
So he also built, I think it was Wine Library.
Yeah.
And so have you guys ever kind of connected?
No,
you guys ever crossed paths?
He's a huge follow for me. I just think his message is so on brand, and I just love what he stands for. And he's a wine guy, so
that's 100%.
Unbelievable.
I'm going to tell you, I'm actually heading to New York next week for a conference that myself and my business partner, Laura Stewart, are going to be speaking at to real estate agents. I've had him on the podcast. If I ever get him on the podcast again, I guarantee you I'm going to make the connection for you because you guys are wine people. It's kind of cool, right? You guys obviously, I think, is it in the shot, by the way, Clyde? Do they see the bottles of wine here? Yeah. They do? Okay, awesome. So we're going to be talking about all things wine and so much more. But then again, started his own wine distribution agency, partnered with, I think, one of the biggest names in the wine business, Jackson Triggs. Yeah. I want to talk about all things like how that all happened. You started the whole Don't Poke the Bear, which is interesting because the way that it's spelt. Make sure we try to bring that up, the image of the wine, Clyde, because it's kind of cool. I love the patch on the eye. There's a story behind it, which is actually kind of close to home. It is. Do they see that? Do they see the patch as well? It's really cool. I can't wait to hear the story. Father of 4 boys. 2 twins? One
set of twins, so 14-year-old, 10-year-old, and then twins.
Got a 10-year-old, 8-year-old myself. We're going to talk about the whole balancing and just being a dad in today's environment. I want to get your take on that as well. And then I think it's, and you got to let me know if this is still happening, but I have a note here that says created a foundation with your beautiful wife, Natalie, called Friends First. Is that still happening?
It's still happening, but we've gone now direct to the group that we wanted to support in the first place, which is Kids Help Phone.
Okay.
And so all of the funding we're doing out of Don't Poke the Bear goes directly now to Kids Help Phone. Before we were alcohol, and we thought having a buffer between alcohol and kids was something that would be important. We work very closely with the LCBO, and we're 3-4 years into the project, and they said, no, we raise money for sick kids, and we raise money for all these great charities. Just go direct.
I love that.
It actually made it easier. So now we're directly connected with Kids Help Phone and funding their Feel Out Loud campaign.
Awesome. We're going to take it right back to the start.
Yeah.
Why the whole wine? How did you get into this world of wine?
I was 16.
Okay.
didn't have a summer job lined up. It was late in the game for organizing that kind of thing as a 16-year-old. I ended up down at a winery in southwestern Ontario called Peely Island, Peely Island Winery. It's about 400 kilometers from home. And I went down there, ended up, sleeping on a tent at the winery, which is on an island, and basically was a summer student. So did anything they asked me to do: prune a vine, cut grass, work in the retail shop, clean, make
So this was just like a job that
it was just a summer job.
Got it. Okay.
But I completely fell in love. I'm like, I love farming. I just love the hard work behind it. And I was there and I'm like, this is really fun. And I'm just starting to get a taste for it. So flash forward, that was the starting point.
And at 16, you got to be honest, did you actually get the taste of the wine as well?
I always spat it out.
Okay.
Clearly.
Yeah. Okay. So now you're kind of, is it the work that you enjoyed, or was it like actually what was going on there in terms of the wines, and like, what was it that you really enjoyed about it?
Honestly, the farming aspect has always been what I think is fascinating. You're growing fruit and harvesting it, making a product every year. So every year it's different, around the world. You may get no harvest, you can get huge harvest. That part really was fascinating to me. Then this, like, the storytelling, right? The wine itself, who's behind it? Why is it made that way? Why does the winemaker make it that way? How did he or she get support from the vineyard that year? I think all that's really incredible. And then I'm a big family guy. I've got 4 kids. I come from 4 boys. When you look at Europe and you think about 5, 6, 7 generation family businesses with, hugely valuable real estate underneath it, how they make it through one generation after the next, through world wars and everything, that just to me is like super fascinating.
It's one of the toughest things that I find being a business owner is having that longevity, right? Like where you have a vision yourself, and then you mentioned it going through like generations for the kids to actually be bought in. And I'm sure you've heard thousands of stories where maybe the kids just lost it, like in terms of they got all this money that they came into, and they thought it was easy, but then they didn't have that drive. And how do you, talking about your 4 boys, like how are you trying to bring them up, or maybe not, like in terms of in the business, or just instilling that work ethic, right? Because I'm sure as much as, like for me, for sure, as much as I try to have an environment that is a little tougher and grittier for my kids, I can never take them to where I grew up. I grew up on the north part of Toronto called Rexdale. One of those areas where people were always told to put up your windows, kind of lock your doors. That has a stigma around it, and for good reason. My parents, my father being a taxi driver his whole life, my mother being a factory worker her whole life, grade 4, grade 8 education. I saw them pinch pennies. Like, I know people say it, like I literally saw them on the mattress counting the pennies and the quarters my dad made that day driving taxi. Like that's instilled in my brain and in my memory. My kids maybe break a toy, and I've heard my 10-year-old say, it's okay to the 8-year-old, daddy and mommy will get another one. And I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah. Like that's the first thing that you thought about, that it's okay to just break shit, right? What's your, like, how are you dealing with that? Because you said 14-year-old?
14, 12, and twins are just about 10.
Okay, cool. So how are you and Natalie and working around that? Like, how are you navigating that?
Yeah, great question. Like many Canadians, my family's background, part of it comes from Germany. So my dad came to Canada 1947, post-war, with nothing, 2 siblings, and worked on a farm. They bought a farm in Ottawa. Like, I think this is an immigrant story from back then. And that's what they did. Right. And then they finally moved into Ottawa, and then dad went to school, got a law degree, then, left Ottawa, came to Toronto all by himself, met my mom, and that story's there. Flash forward, I don't know how many years, where we were probably around the same age, 10, 12, 14 with my brothers. My parents bought a farm. So my dad was like, I've got all these boys and I had to hustle for my livelihood to get to where I am now. He bought this farm. It was inexpensive, north of Collingwood. Bought it, and then we went up there, and they didn't have enough money to put more than one sofa. Like we had one IKEA sofa in that house, and I think they were like, "What have we done? We actually can't afford this." And then they were like, "Well, we're coming up every weekend. Like this is going to be part of our life." So we worked on the farm.
So they put you to work right away.
Man.
Love it. Did you like it at that time though? Like at a younger age. I know later on you did, but like even at that younger age,
I mean, it was a lot of fun too, right? You're on a farm, so you might have a 22 or a BB gun and try to shoot birds. You would, you'd be like, my dad would say like, "Okay, we're going to pick rocks today." We're like, pick rocks? He's like, yeah. So we'd hook the hay wagon up to the tractor and get into the field. And someone would jockey for like, well, I'm going to drive the tractor. And he's like, there's no one driving the tractor. It's lowest and slowest gear off the tractor, follow the wagon, put the rocks on. So when we plow it, it's all good. It's true story. So that work ethic was instilled in us by my dad, who's still with us. And now we have 4 boys. We go to the farm.
It's crazy how that works. Sorry, you got 4 boys, eh? Like,
actually,
where are you in the, like, are you
I'm
and your
third.
brother? You're the third. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm the youngest, and I always laugh and say it's such a healthy reminder having 2 older brothers and you as well, that you're closer to the bottom than you are to the top, right? Like, I don't know how it is in your like relationship with your brothers, but I'm 42, so 47 and 52. And this whole thing of Jas Takhar and all the businesses, these guys don't give a shit. Like, it's like, no, like, we'll still remind you and humble you really quick.
Real fast,
Is
right?
it similar to your kind of?
It's the ultimate check. You're riding a bit high, you have a good month in work or whatever. And they're not afraid to throw a swing at you and you're like, oh, right back to earth. Yeah.
Were you guys close? Like,
very.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we're still all very close and get along well.
I feel bad for people that don't have siblings. It's tough, man, because for me, they were my first set of best friends, you know, like, and especially in the area that I mentioned that I grew up in, like, they kept me away from that nonsense. Like, because they went through it, they made sure that I didn't go through that. And, you know, one thing my eldest brother always helped me with is that because he's 10 years my senior, when he was 25 and I'm 15, he was sneaking me into clubs. And there's obviously like a cool factor there when you're a 15-year-old. But what it really did is he taught me, like, hey, buddy, you got one mouth in 2 years. Like, don't say shit that's going to embarrass me. He was more worried about his kind of clout and reputation. But for me, I got to hang out with people that were 10 years my senior. When I turned 25, it was kind of like, it's like deja vu. I've been through this before, right? Now, going back to your kids, are you bringing them along? Like, what's your thought process with mom, and mom being wife, in terms of your kids? Like, how are you trying to make sure that they get that work ethic as well? Because I see what your dad did, obviously.
Yeah, kids hear everything in our house, right? It's loud, but we're always talking a little louder. So if Nat and I are in the kitchen talking about a shitty day or a good day or something happened at work or an opportunity, they're watching TV and they're like, what is it, Dad? What's going on? I'm like, oh my God, they hear everything. So they often hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, being an entrepreneur, and now Natalie and I are both entrepreneurs. So they hear it, but I think they respect the work that goes into it. And they definitely see it's not easy street, and any entrepreneur will tell you that it can be punishing at times and very rewarding at times. So they see the work ethic there. Fortunately, our family's very close. So we go to the farm almost every weekend.
Okay.
And my dad is at a state now where he can't, run around and do the jobs that he did before. So he'll call and say, like, I need the boys this weekend. We got some cleanup to do. We've got a fence to build. We've got a shed to clean out. And I tell the boys, I'm like, boys, you better work hard. Like, you think I'm tough at times? Like, even though Opa's a really good man, like, if you don't work around him, you're going to hear it. And, he's the king of move something to one end of the barn. You do it. You're like, okay, we're done. He's like, yeah. In his head, he's like, they didn't work hard. And I was like, we're going to move it all back. And they're like, what? And he'll literally make us move it all the way back. And just look me in the eye, basically saying, this is a lesson for them. Don't worry about it. It's like, okay.
That's awesome.
Yep.
But it's kind of cool that yourself and Natalie kind of allow that as well, right?
Yes.
Like, so you're not necessarily being the helicopter kind of parents, for lack of a better word. You're allowing grandparents to at least granddad to play a part in that. I think that's important.
He's not mean. He's just, he'll see it and he'll see, like, wow, they hustled and they got the job done working together. Then it's like, you're done for the day. But if not, then without being mean, he's just going to say, like, I needed to go all back now.
I love that. Okay. So now going back to University of Western, you're sitting there. What are you studying?
First year I didn't know. So I was like super broad, 5 different courses.
Sure.
And then even though I didn't take poli-sci my first year, I dropped everything and went full on major in poli-sci second and fourth year.
And so now you're sitting there, and then how does the whole online commerce, e-commerce start? Like, how did that light bulb, so to speak?
You'll hear a lot of family stories. So Peely Island is quite remote. Like, the island is, I said, from Toronto over 4 hours away, over 400 kilometers away. We had really interesting labels, but we, didn't have a decent presence in the LCBO at the time. And Dad was always, ahead of his time. He's not a technically savvy guy in terms of e-commerce and everything, but he's like, how else can we sell it?
What year is this, by the way?
This is 90. probably like 95, 6, 7.
Shit, so this is like when the internet's just coming out.
Like we're talking like dial-up, telephone. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get it. Clyde and my boys Bull are like, what the hell are these two old guys are talking about?
Idea, right?
That's how we used to get on the internet, Clyde. Like,
plug in the telephone line.
Yeah, exactly.
See what happens.
So 95, 96, okay.
Yeah, and we worked with a local company called Jas Marketing, and they were like, what do you want to do? We're like, we want to make it so that people can buy our wine online. Like extend the winery's reach.
What drugs are you on at this time? They're thinking like this doesn't make sense. Yeah. Why are people going to buy wine online?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So that's what we did. We started it up, and that was the first of its kind in Ontario, VQA wine.
How many obstacles did you come across at that point? Like, how do you distribute even? Like, was it even allowed?
It was allowed because if you're a winery, you have a winery retail store. That sale is an extension of your winery, direct to consumer. So you were allowed to do it. It's just nobody did.
Right.
And so then we had to figure out exactly right. Like, crap, what have we done? Now we have to deliver one case of wine to like, Moosonee, Ontario. It's like, how are we gonna do that?
Right. It might not even be worth it.
It may not be worth it. So you may call them and say like, yeah, we don't have that reach yet. But Toronto, Windsor, London, local, all that area was an easy one because the trucks were out delivering to restaurants anyway. So we just loaded up more orders to get to consumers.
Try to go back to that for a second, Andrew, like what you guys were going through. Behind you, you see a lot of acronyms. That's my success table. Yeah. And one of them is RFA, which stands for, it's actually on your mug as well, Ready, Fire, Aim.
Yep.
I believe that a lot of people in life in general, specifically, and I'm really speaking to the people who might be thinking about starting a business, they fall into paralysis by analysis, right? And so instead of ready, aim, fire, which I think we all grew up with, that saying, I'm a big proponent of pull the trigger.
Yep.
Fire.
Get after it.
Get after it. Adjust along the way. You'll quickly come to learn that you're too far left from the target or too far right, rather than just sitting there not pulling the trigger. I feel like that was happening a lot at that time because how the hell are we going to get this to Toronto even? Like, let alone the other places that you weren't able to distribute at that time. What were some of those obstacles again that you came across where it was just like, you know what, let's just pull the trigger and figure it out along the way?
Well, Dad is a ready, fire, aim guy.
Okay.
100%. So, given that it was sort of coming from him, like, I think we should do this, figure it out. It was like, okay, let's figure it out. So then, I went, to the folks at the winery and like, here's what we're going to do. They're like, why are we doing this? What is it? So it's like, you guys, what's going to happen. Like, he's going to come in and he's going to really push on it. So let's just try to figure this out. So we just try to figure it out. And I've seen a lot of your content. Like, that is the way an entrepreneur has to work. Nothing's perfect. The P word does not exist. If it did, everyone would do it, right? Like, you're going to get your ass kicked. You're going to make mistakes. It's like, okay, fast fix. How did that not work? What patch can we put in? And then 3, 4, 5, 10 years later, you look back like, wow, we have come a long way from then to now, right? Look at the network we've created and the fixes we've done to get there. So in that case, the logistics were a nightmare, not only on the road, but like in the back end of the winery. Right. One case orders, printing slips, all these things. It's like, you didn't just have auto prints and all the stuff we have now, right? You had to like manually do everything and slap a sticker on and get the case and load it in.
As you're saying this, I'm sure you've seen the image of Jeff Bezos in his garage. Yeah. I'm picturing that.
Yeah, it would be a very, very small microcosm of that. But yes, in principle, that's the idea. But that principle, that RFA, is exactly how entrepreneurs, I think, inherently go to market, right?
Yeah, and you hear it a lot too, right? Like, people say, oh, one of the traits that you need as an entrepreneur is that you need to be a risk taker. And for me, it's funny, like, I've never really thought that I'm taking massive risks, right? Like, I think it's more of just being gullible in your own world. Like, no, I think this is going to work. Yep. So I don't even think there's that much of a risk taking involved with entrepreneurs, because we kind of just have this blind faith that it's going to work. And so for people who think that you need to have, let me rephrase this. You definitely need to have the stomach to make the jump and to start something. But you don't have to have some magical blue pill that allows you to take risks. You actually just need to believe in what you're doing.
You just need to go, right? You just need to take that step. And it's a scary one for the first timer. And I've met entrepreneurs that are like 45, around about our age, that are like very successful at a big shop, making huge money, and then step out. And you're like, what? Most people would say, like, what are you doing? why are you look what you have. And it's like, no, I'm not fulfilled. Yeah. And I see an opportunity, I'm going to go for it. And they're obviously intelligent people because they're doing well in other capacities. And then when I started our business, the first of our businesses, my wife was like, if you want to do this, go for it. Like, she was working at Pfizer at the time. She had a steady income. She was like 8 months pregnant with our first of 4 boys. And she's like, if you're going to work as hard for yourself as you do for them, I'm not worried. Like, you'll just figure it out. We'll just figure it out. I'm like, okay. And you need that. You want your partner in crime or your best friend in your family to support you, because you need that wingman, that wing person. In that case, she just said, yeah, do it. Go for it. And that was it.
I mean, we were talking off air really quickly, you and I, just before the boys said that we're live, about the podcast and how this all started. I mean, at the start, Andrew, I can't tell you the amount of people that thought that I was on like some type of crack, because they're like, it makes no sense. Why do you have videographers following you around? Why do you record yourself and have conversations with business owners, even when you're supposed to be selling real estate?
Yeah.
And you said something just like 3 seconds ago about if you're not fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important. If you're looking into starting something, you probably should start with what doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
Like, I just have a funny feeling, and you did mention it earlier, but I want you to touch on it because I think people need to hear it from different people all the time, which is, if you want to start something with whatever you like, you might as well just start there, because I think you liked wine.
Yeah. And
you, like you mentioned, you liked growing stuff on the farm. And if I told you to start a business on mics, that might not work out for you,
yep.
right? Unless you have some weird aficionation
I don't.
with mics. Okay.
No.
Does that make sense? Like, would you agree with that? Like, I think people who wanting to start out, like, just start with what you like, so it doesn't feel like work. You know, when I tell my wife I'm coming to work, it's just weird because we use that word. Yeah. I also don't want to maybe piss her off too much, because I might say like, well, I'm going to have fun. And she might be like, what the hell's going on? Like, all the time you're having, the truth is I'm kind of always having fun. Like, it doesn't feel like work to me when you put in those extra hours, right?
And God knows we do put in the extra hours, right? When you're responsible, especially for a small business, you're making coffee, then you're pitching to the president of the LCBO, and then you're going on a work with your colleague into a store and whatever. It's like, you're doing everything often. So you need to love what you do.
I love what you said there. I'm not sure if the guys caught it. And who's watching right now, he said, sometimes you're meeting with people, but you're also making the coffee. That's what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're cleaning the dishes.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks it's the stuff that they see on social, right? Oh, fucking Andrew has, don't poke the bear. He has wine. He's making hundreds of millions of dollars, and look at his lifestyle. Yeah, but my buddy also makes the coffee for when the client comes in. Yeah. Making sure that their experience is a positive one.
Yeah, right? we had a customer, we got into the keg once upon a time. It was a dream of mine to work with the keg.
Got the wine into the keg.
It was actually a beer.
Oh, got it.
Because I was working with some imported brands and bringing them into market. And it was the first and only time that I got a product into the keg. And 2 locations in Windsor did not have the product. They couldn't get it from their LCBO warehouse and whatever. I'm on the road in Hamilton with a colleague visiting stores. Mm-hmm. And this keg calls and like, man, we're like 5-6 days without being able to order. It's on the menu. Like, this is not acceptable. And I was like, you're right. I'm like, I'll get back to you. So we stop, we look up the LCBO app. We see 36 bottles available in Whitby. I'm in Hamilton. So I'm like, Amy, I got to go. So I get back to my car. I drive all the way to Whitby. I call the store. I'm like, put those 36 aside.
Really quickly, for out of province, out of country listeners, that's probably about a 2.5 hour drive. Yeah. 2 hour drive. Yeah.
Okay. Exactly. Right. And it's getting close to traffic time, right?
Oh, okay. So 5 hour drive.
So I get there, pick it up, and then I drive from Whitby to Windsor. So now out of provincers, we're talking like 5, 6, 7 hours.
Easily.
Right?
Easily.
So I get there at like 8 or 9 at night, drop the 36 bottles between 2 restaurants. They were very kind. They fed me some food, and then I drove home. So I think I was like 982 kilometers and I don't know how many hours in the car. But I'm like, that you got to do it.
And how much would you, if you can remember, what was that order worth to you?
Oh my God. Look, a few $100.
Yeah. Why did you do that?
The customer. I'm like, that is my customer. And all the other locations in Ontario have it. These 2 restaurants don't. They weren't mad. They were like, we just need your help. I'm like, yep. Okay.
See, sometimes you don't even need to come up with a new business idea. It's just doing and going the extra mile in a business or a service that already exists. And for people who've heard that saying before, go the extra mile, they're beautiful sayings, but the story you just told is exactly what it takes. Because most people say, wait, hang on. The order's $200, call it. Yep. You probably spent in gas like $500.
Easily.
You lost.
I was driving a diesel, so I was actually in good shape. Yeah.
So it was probably $200.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you definitely didn't make money.
No.
You most likely lost money, but I have a funny feeling if you look at your order slips and how many orders that customer made afterwards, the lifelong relationship that got built and the lifetime value of that client is what we're trying to build.
Yeah. And in that case, that, the LCBO warehouse didn't have products.
Right.
And I was begging for them, please put it down there so no one has to do this again. And I sent a screenshot of the mileage. I pushed reset when I started that mission. So 982 at 1 a.m, I took a picture and I sent it to the inventory manager. I said, please, Mike, help me out here so I don't have to do this drive again. He called me in the morning. He's like, oh my God, you did not do that. I'm like, there was no other choice. He's like, okay, I'll send a pallet down tomorrow and you never have to do that again. I'm like, thank you. So it was a personal connect where he felt bad and he was like, it's done.
And why was the keg such a big thing for you? I'm curious.
I don't know.
I say because keg for me, still till this day, with the headquarters here in Toronto, we have, I believe, some of the best restaurants, lounges in North America.
Yep.
Personally, I believe that. And we have some amazing steakhouses. But I think that keg till this day has the best value.
Yeah.
Like it's not, $250 steaks. You're not going to find that there. And you will definitely find better steaks in other restaurants. But for $50, I just don't think you're going to find a better steak.
Yeah,
and the experience, I forget their slogan. It just runs, it's not coming to me right now. You have a friend in keg or your neighborhood. Anyways, but the experience in any keg you go right across Ontario, I don't know if they're Canadian wine.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they are? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't think I've had it outside of Ontario. You're always going to experience it the same way. It's like that McDonald's fries. But why the keg for you? Same thing? Or like, you're a big keg goer? Or?
No, I mean, I like going to the keg just like you do.
Yeah.
And I always tried to get in and just couldn't. I would cold call like any entrepreneur, right? Salesperson trying to get into the keg. They wouldn't ever respond. No emails, nothing. At one point at Peely Island, I took I took a bottle of wine, poured it out.
Okay.
Took sand and rocks, poured it in. I put a little note and said to the buyer who's in Vancouver, I'm like, hey, I'm basically stuck on this island here. Please just call me or give me a reason to come out and see you. Andrew, phone number, email, Peely Island bottle, capped it, couriered it out. The next day he called me. He's like, buddy, I've been doing this for a long time and I get a lot of people calling me. I've never seen that shit before. He's like, I'm still not buying anything from you because we're good. But I wanted to call you back and let's just keep it.
You got his attention.
Yep.
That's all you needed.
I didn't think I'd get anything, but he said, I'm not buying anything right now. But when I do, we'll talk. And that's how it all happened.
I love that.
Years later.
I got the site up here for Jackson Triggs.
Yep.
Their thing here is proud to be Canada's #1 wine. They are one of the biggest. Would you call it one of the biggest wineries? Is that safe to say?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is it almost like the biggest winery that?
Probably statistically in Canada would be 1 or 2.
Okay.
The Jackson Triggs brand. Yeah.
How did that whole partnership happen? Connection happen? Like how did that all come to be?
So Alan Jackson is the co-founder of Jackson Triggs along with Don Triggs.
Yep.
Alan was at Labatt in the 70s and they had a wine division.
Okay.
And
Labatt in Toronto?
Yeah, like Labatt beer.
Okay, so right by the airport.
You got it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So they had a small wine division.
They're still there.
I think it was called Brights was the name. And Alan was the head winemaker there. At some point, he was in management and they said, look, we're getting out of the wine business. We're going to sell the wine business unit off. We're beer and that's that. What he said was, okay. And they started down that road and he said, well, what if we took it? Like, what if we did a management buyout? And he's like, yeah, Labatt was like, well, we don't really care who it goes to. We want it out. So Alan, started talking to people and then knew Don Triggs, who was a very successful marketer in another space altogether. And they sort of teamed up and said, yeah, let's do this. So they did that, pulled it out of Labatt and then started raising money. I think Jerry Schwartz was involved with Onyx. Ultimately, they put a whole bunch of wineries together, created the Jackson Triggs brand, and then became public and then started buying wineries, not only in Canada, but around the world, became the 7th largest wine company in the world. And then in 2005, maybe 2006, Constellation, which was the largest wine company in the world down in the States.
Are they still #1? Because we were talking about Gary Vee off air.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was on there. I can't remember now. He just sold his wine, Empathy Wines, to Constellation.
There you go.
They I think they did like a 9-figure buyout or something.
Not surprised,
or something like that. So I'm just curious.
Incredible. I mean, Constellation is an amazing success story. They've done great things. They came in and public company to public company. They first tried to do it a little bit politely, and then they basically said, no, like this is happening. And so it happened.
Okay.
I had just moved from Pelee Island to Vincor 6 months earlier. And so all of a sudden we're like, the business is being sold. I'm like, what have I done? Like,
shit.
I went here to learn the global side of it. I was at a family business, and now I'm like in the big seat with this beautiful company, and they sell. And I remember Don Triggs and Alan being in the boardroom talking to all the employees saying like, it's a bit sooner than we would have liked, but we didn't have as much control as we'd like, and it's happening. The sale was $1.2 billion.
Back in
2006.
Okay. Wow.
$1.2 billion for a Canadian wine company that they started. So unbelievable success story. You know, I was probably like, Alan was my boss's 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 boss. Like I was an entry-level salesperson. Right. He was basically a co-founder and the head of winemaking.
But you probably still like did you guys still like,
always,
did you meet?
We'd run into each other. We'd be in a room like this doing wine tastings every month, trying all wines and stuff like that. My actual boss, Ann Givens, is still Alan's neighbor at Wine Country. And he left, he retired in 2009. And in 2009, I was leaving to start my import agency. And she said, you know, Alan's retiring, but he's not going to be happy retired. Like he loves making wine. Yeah. You're starting your business and you're going to need an Ontario wine to be a viable going concern. You guys should talk. And I was like, you want me to talk with Alan? Like nicest guy you've ever met, not an intimidating man, but just like, you want the 20 something to talk to that guy. She's like, do it. Of course. And why not? So she puts us together. We go have a greasy spoon breakfast out in Hamilton. Love it. And then we come back, then we meet again. And he's basically like, yeah, I want to make wine. Like, this is a really cool line. He's like, I don't want to make Wendy a winery widow again. So a winery widow is if you own a winery and you're close to it, you're there all the time, especially with your name on it. Like you're there all the time. So husband or wife is left in the dust. It's like, I got to go back. So he's like, I don't want a winery again. And I think there's a perfectly good way to make wine without having a winery, because I know all the wineries out there and they could use a little extra capacity. And I know the growers and I know where to buy the grapes. So I can make the wine. Do you think you can sell it? And I was like, working with you? Yeah. So I remember the second time coming back from breakfast, I called my wife and said, Nat, I think we're going to make wine with Alan Jackson. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah. She's like, well, what happened? I'm like, well, I don't know. He's all excited. He wants to keep going. And we need this. And she's like, well, why you? I'm like,
why you?
Thanks a lot. I'm like, I don't know why me, but maybe it's just a good fit between us. But
you married me?
What are I? Come on. So, but it's a fair question, right? Like, schmucky 20-something-year-old partnered up with Alan Jackson is like a dream story.
Right.
We call the business Generations Wine Company. Just
I love that name.
Very simple. And started making wine together in 2010.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so are you guys still in business with each other? Okay. And what does his mentorship mean for you? Like
honestly, it's everything. Like you think about entrepreneurs, you aspire to success, right? I think that's why we all go to work. We want to succeed, whatever it is we're doing. You look at him and you wouldn't know if he, and I would say this to his face, and hi, Alan, if you're watching, like if he was the janitor in the room to clean up or put coffee away, or if he owned the building and 5 next to it, you would have no idea. And to me, the ultimate mentor is someone who's very successful, but so grounded you don't even know. Like you could pony up to a bar and not know who you're talking to. And then someone's like, you realize you were talking to Alan there? It's like, who? Yeah. So he's just a really grounded, humble, down-to-earth person. And I love trying to aspire towards that.
I've been lucky enough, Andrew, to have 3 real, like aside from my parents and my older brothers, as I spoke earlier, but I've had 3 mentors in my professional, and then obviously they kind of crossed into my personal life. I'm a big, huge advocate of finding mentors because they cut your learning curve. Yeah. I like to think in half almost, right? As well as you don't have to hit your head against the wall because they kind of did. And someone who actually really wants to take you under their wing is going to want you to succeed. I think that's the true job of a mentor, right? Helping you succeed, as you mentioned, but also cutting that time in half. But from a mentee's perspective, for somebody who's watching and listening right now, they know I got to get a mentor. Great. What are some things that you maybe did as a mentee that made that relationship stronger? Because it's hard sometimes being the mentee as well.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's respect. Yeah. He is very good at what he does. And he would tell you, like, I'm really good at making wine and doing it well, vintage over vintage over vintage. Despite what Mother Nature throws at me, I will come up with a way to make that wine the best that it can be this year. So that's his real strength. And given what he's seen, he's got strength in M&A and marketing and everything else, but he wouldn't pretend like that's his pro thing. I think for him, he's like, hey, I've got this young guy. He's hungry. He knows sales. He knows everyone at the LCBO. The buyers trust him. He will give me a good shot to continue letting me do what I want to do. And it's going to also fuel this young guy and give him a shot, starting a business in the wine space with very little, if any, capital, which is very hard to do. So it was really, and like, because he wanted to be, winery free, it meant that this business partner didn't have to find a bunch of money, right? It was then, we need money to create inventory, right? That's it. And when I went to the bank and said, here's what I want to do. And they're like, yeah, no. And then he went to the bank and said, hey, it's Alan. Here's what we're doing. No winery, no assets. Got a label. The listings are done. The LCBO is good to go. We need enough money to make 3,000 cases. They're like, yeah, where do you want to go?
And how much do you need?
Done.
So just like the power of connections, right?
And just, he knows the bank at that point. He knew them so well. And they're like, yeah, you're done.
You mentioned what he said about it doesn't matter what Mother Nature throws at him. He knows how to make good wine. This might sound like a very ignorant question. I just don't know the wine business and I don't know how it's made. Like that's not what I'm in. I've always wondered how Ontario comes up with like some amazing wines with our climate. Like when did Ontario wine become a big thing? And obviously Mother Nature in terms of like a day like today, for example, and it's going to get a lot colder here in the next coming weeks and months. How does one get past all that? And I've always thought that the best wines would come from a warm climate place like California, but Ontario's done its thing and figured it out. So does the weather not play that big of a role?
The weather plays a huge role.
Okay.
I mean, it's just an overwhelming role. Our biggest enemy in Ontario is winter temperatures.
Right.
Like this is like wipe out a vine cold. So usually 19 below, 20, 21 below Celsius in our world.
So we haven't got there yet in this.
Haven't, and thank God, because if it gets that cold, and you'll see it on the Weather Network coming in, you get to that temperature, certain grape varieties are done. Like the plant will die, not on the spot, and it may bring 20% back the next year, but it really compromises it. So like a Sauvignon Blanc and a Merlot, grape varieties that you be well known for, those are gone. Like they're the first to go. So in our case here, you're going to plant a more winter hardy clone of those grapes, right? Just Sauvignon Blanc is not Sauvignon Blanc. You can buy a certain clone that's better in the winter than not. You'll also plant hybrids like Baco Noir and Vidal. Those are grapes that are vinifera from that family, are super winter hardy. Like they can take a beating and just keep on delivering and good yield, and then are representative of what we do here. But most wine regions in the world always have some random act of Mother Nature to sharpen them up. Too much heat in Australia or California, hail in France, earthquakes. I mean, like Mother Nature is the boss, right?
Right.
And every wine region in the world has to work with her to put the best out there.
And has the world now recognized Ontario wine as one, like some of the best? Like where does Ontario wine compare to like what you were mentioning it from Australia and from, I got my boy Clyde, who's a Frenchman. He's actually, the only reason he's here today is because he knew that I was going to bring wine to the pod. To the vault, right, Clyde? I know. You like, do you think Andrew's going to bring wine? I was like, I'm not sure. I'm going to go buy it and make sure that we have wine for Clyde. Where is it recognized in the world in terms of like comparison to the other countries?
We're such a young industry still, like 30 something years old.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about going back to generational wine families in Europe doing it for 7 and 8 generations. Like they learned
nothing.
Yeah. They've learned along the way what to plant, where to plant it, how to bring it in, when to bring it in. And they have 100 years of history and like looking at numbers to say, now's the time. Here, we don't have that. We're going through that process. What we're doing really well is whites, like really, really well. And I think the big piece for us is to make tastings blind. If you're going to, a wine tasting and someone's like, I don't like Ontario wine. Blind taste everything. Take the label, the name, the price, everything away. All those biases have to be removed. Then you can objectively taste a wine and say, damn, this is really good.
Right.
It's like, well, you're drinking Ontario Riesling or Chardonnay or red, like Pinot or whatever. Like, we make some really, really good wines. Part of our problem, I think, is image. We just haven't, made good wine, great wine for 30 years. We've been making it maybe the last 15 or 20. And that takes time to get through a generation. My dad's generation would have said, sweeping statement, stereotype, like, oh yeah, Ontario wines. This is the early 80s. Like, no thanks. I'm sticking with that.
Sure.
The kid hears it and they're like, yeah, well, my parents didn't drink Ontario wine. They drank French. So that's where I'm going. And it takes a generation to get through it. Our biggest supporters now are younger consumers and passionate wine people that come out to wine country and see it all. They're the people that we're trying to bring in.
You said younger, so I'm curious. What does that mean? Like, are you talking like 25 to 30? Or
yeah.
Are you talking, okay.
Yeah, 25, 30, 35.
When did you see that shift happening, that wine was kind of cool to drink? Like, for me growing up, I would never drink a glass of wine because I thought that's what old people drink. Like, and it's like, wine, well, why am I going to drink that? Like, I'd rather have, like when I was 16, 17, it was the rum and cokes.
Sure.
But I grew up. But even then I went into the whiskeys and the vodkas and beer. Wine wasn't as, for lack of a better word, like accepted in social realms from a younger generation. Yeah. Now, 2024, it's been like this, I think, for the last decade at least. Like, this is the cool stuff to drink. Yeah. When did you see that shift happening? Because you were in the wine world. Yeah. You would have seen it a lot sooner than I did.
Yeah, then I would say the 90s probably. And that's, maybe through my lens as a teenager in the 90s, I would have seen it. But, you were starting to see more diversity on shelves, more stories behind the labels and where the wines came from and who was behind them. That's really interesting. And now with our consumer, they want to know way more about who's making the wine, what do they stand for, what are they putting their goodwill behind. There's 5,000 wines on the LCBO shelves. Like, how do I differentiate? I'd love to hear Gary V's point of view, but like, you've got to stand out. You've got to do something. The wine has to be great. It has to be value. Like, whatever I paid for it, 50, 100, 15, $10, whatever's in the bottle has to step up to that number in the ballpark, but then the wine has to speak to me.
It's tough. Like, when you mentioned, you go to the LCBO, and for our out of country listeners, that's where, it's all privatized here. And so we go and get our wine from the liquor store, and there is thousands upon thousands of labels. For someone who's starting out drinking wine, how would they decipher on what to try? Like, is $100 bottle of wine like that much better than the $20 bottle of wine? I know it should be, but is it all the time? Yeah. And then where does someone just kind of get started with their palate? Like, let me try this. Is it like, how would you advise somebody to kind of just starting out drinking wine?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, like, wine is like food, right? You could try a slice of pizza that's $4. Yeah. And be like, yeah, that's really good. And you could try a $40 piece of pizza with, something crazy on it.
Right.
And think it's terrible. Right? Because you may not be a truffles fan or a mushroom fan. You'd be like, that, I would never eat that again. Right. If it was 10 times the price of that, like, okay, I'm going there. So wine's no different. And that $40, that $400 bottle of wine, maybe for the enthusiast, just off the charts good, represent that region and be like, damn, that's good. But a new person to wine would be like, dude, I don't taste the difference at all. Like, and that wine at $10, like, I can afford that. And it's a bit sweeter on the palate, or the fruit comes out, you're like, I like that all day long. That's the beauty of wine.
Well, we're gonna test some wine and taste some wine. I want to know the story as we sip it. But before we go into the wine, I'm just curious. I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, Andrew. Other than wine, what do you like to drink? Like, for me, I'm a tequila guy. For the last, I'm gonna say 6 months, the shifts happen. I've always been a vodka person, so I love tasting different vodkas. I like drinking them with some soda, without soda. But now I made the shift to tequila because it just helps me, especially a Blanco, helps me with no hangovers. Like, I'm not that I drink every single day and a lot of alcohol, but when I choose to drink, it's usually tequila or some red wine with some steak. Side note, is it always have to be red wine with steak? Is that okay?
No,
good. Like, so
not.
going back to what you said, try a bunch of stuff, test it out. So for everybody who's watching, like, test, try. If you've never tried oysters, you'll never know if they're good or not. It's the same thing with wine. You got to test it out. What else do you kind of partake in terms of alcohol?
Probably a go-to in the summer would be a gin and tonic.
Okay.
Just light, refreshing. I think gin has got lots of different flavor profiles, and you can hit it with a cucumber or lime or whatever. I
feel like gin's starting to really come out now.
Yeah.
Like, where it hasn't been branded well, in my opinion, anyways, right? Again, going back to that younger crowd, and I'm going to put us in there as well. Like, that 20 to 45 year olds, like, nobody was speaking about gin a few years ago, but I see that maybe it has something to do with, I think it's Clooney, right? Is it Clooney who has the gin brand?
He definitely has a tequila brand.
He has a tequila brand. It's Ryan Reynolds then, I think, who has the Aviator, is it? Okay.
Or Aviation.
I think it was Aviation, the Aviation gin. Yeah. So I think he's kind of making it cooler.
Unreal.
But interesting, because I always feel like vodkas, you go to a lounge or a club or whatever the kids call it these days, and the big bottles that are coming out.
Showy stuff, right?
Yeah, the showy stuff is the vodka that usually coming out. So gin in the summertime.
Gin is good. Tequila, I hated because my brothers, I don't know how old I was, probably younger than 15, and I'll just be careful saying that, but they put 7 shots of tequila into me in about a half an hour.
Oh.
And it was like just cheap Jose Cuervo, whatever it was. It was just
the shoe polish stuff. Yeah.
Dude, I was so violently ill, and I was like, I'm never touching tequila again. And it took me a long time to cozy up to it again. Now all my friends drink it. They're like, it's not that. Like, try this one. It's really good. You can drink it on its own. Like, okay, I always want to be open.
So you know what I found about
now I can start to going again.
So what I found about tequila, the branding of tequila, not from a marketing perspective, but what people talk about when it comes to tequila, it was the one shot that you took after drinking 7 vodkas. You took the one tequila, but the next day you're like, man, my brothers and my friends, that was that damn tequila. Yeah. But they forget that it's probably the 7 vodkas
had something to do with it, right?
So for me, now that I can do the 7 tequilas, if I have that one vodka, I know what took me over the edge. It was the one vodka, not the tequila. Yeah, so sure. Do you ever go into the scotches or the whiskeys?
My father-in-law drinks scotch.
Okay.
And, when I'm with him, I'll usually have, a glass. I'm not, I like it and I'm learning about it, but it's not my go-to. I still like a beer every once in a while after a hockey game or something. Like, there's nothing no-brainer in the room. Beer, right? Cider's great. Yeah. I like that. Port from time to time. Like, it's freezing outside, so like tonight would be a good night for port. I don't know.
I love it.
All over. I love to explore.
Awesome. So, don't poke the bear. Yep. For people who are listening while you're driving right now, I urge you to go take a look at this online, at least the labeling, and then obviously get to the liquor store and pick this up. And I'll tell you what I liked better, the red or the white. But I know this D''ONT has a little bit of a story behind it.
Yep.
As well as this patch on the bear. Like, this is such an interesting label. It's one of the reasons why when Laura, after speaking to your wife for her show, if you haven't checked out the Laura show on YouTube, go do that. She has some amazing guests, including your wife, Natalie. When they told me about the patch, and then I looked this up, I was like, whoever came up with this, I want to speak to the person. Yeah. I said it earlier that the patch and the story behind it has a meaning to me as well. And it's kind of close to my heart as well. I'm going to let you tell the story behind it, obviously. And then I'll tell you kind of what the connection for me was.
Right on. So Alan and I started making wine in 2010. We had a label called Union. That was our first label from 2010 to 2016 at the LCBO, other provinces in Canada. By 2015, sales started lagging a little bit. You'd invest a bit more in a promotion, you'd get a pop, and then it would come back down or even go below where it was in the run rate before. So we were sort of thinking, either we need to do a full makeover on the brand or we need to come up with something different. At the time, I was working with a Spanish winery. I find the Spanish to be really the epicenter of wine right now, the value and the quality.
So when you say right now, not when you guys were making the brand, like you mean right now?
Even now. I mean, just the regions they have, the whites, the reds, the value, the quality, the packaging, and that's what's going to come up next. The packaging is just, I find, so interesting. They're not as restricted by a history in Spain as you might see in Italy or France or something like that. So they're a little bit more outside the box. So I'm working with the Spanish wine company and said, look, we import your wines to Ontario and we love how you market. Would you consider making a label for Alan and I? Like if we gave you a little brief and they're like, you know what? Yeah, we'll do that. Like we're Spanish, you're Ontario. We don't think we're going to be competing on the shelves with that customer. We're happy to help. For $1,000, they said, we'll do it. Like you're looking at me the same way. Like if you started a product now, you add zeros to that, depending on which fancy marketing you go to, right?
Yeah.
So for $1,000, we write a 2-page brief. Basically, we want something Canadian. Like we want to be, at the root of what Ontario is all about, and that's what we have in mind. What we get on drawings on first pass, look is 5 different visuals.
Okay.
And to be fair to them, like they're European and they have
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but sometimes I do it and my guys are kind of used to it. I'm not trying to be rude, but I want to pull something. You said you had to write a brief, but yet it was 2 pages.
Yeah.
What is a brief? Like I kind of know what it is, but like what goes into that?
It's Alan and I telling the designer what's in our little brains. What are we thinking
and put
about?
that on paper, write it down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Literally, like it wasn't a template. It was like a 2-word.
Yeah, you're pouring your heart into this kind of like your story, right?
Yeah.
Got it.
What do we want to see? And the big takeaway was probably Canada, right? Okay. Canadian, something that is universally accepted across the country if we were to do something. So we get 5 drawings back. Here's the European stereotype of Canada, right? We get a picture with a Mountie on it. Sure. We get a picture with an Ontario lake of some kind. Yep. Some like downtown Toronto scene at a crosswalk. We're like, cool. Yep. And I forget what the 4th one was.
Had to be a beaver.
Honestly, probably. But I think there was already a beaver on a label on the shelf. Got it. Right. So we're like, well, we can't do that.
Yeah. Maybe a hockey player.
That's a no-brainer. Right? That's an easy layup.
Got it.
The 5th one, not a word of lie, identical to what you see here is that guy, the bear. Okay. So the first pass, that bear with the patch on it. Yeah. And I think Alan and I both saw the drawings. We're like, oh my God, like this is kind of what Euros think of Canada. Okay. These 5 different stereotypes, but we'll share it around. Like we're always sending emails and around to friends and family. What do you think about this, that, whatever. So everyone's like, yeah, no. A few people though were like, what's with the bear? Yeah. And the patch. What's the story behind that? And there was no story. That was served up to us. My brother calls and is like, dude, I kind of like the bear. It's kind of cool. And did you tell them to put the patch on the bear because you wore a patch as a kid? I'm like, what? No, like it was a 2-page brief. It was just Canada. That was it in a sense. And he's like, well, I think it's pretty cool because, you had the patch as in grade 1, you were bullied.
When you saw the patch really quickly, so I know why your brother asked and you're going to talk about that. Did the patch come into your brain? Like, oh, right, I used to wear a patch.
Only when he said it.
I
almost didn't even see it.
No. Okay, continue.
No. So he's like, you should, that's, you had the patch as a kid or whatever. He's like, it'd be kind of a cool story to tell. I'm like, I don't know about a cool story about bullying in grade 1. That's not whatever. I'm like, I hear you though. I took all the notes down. I chat to Alan. I'm like, oh, and one other thing, my brother, I mentioned this and I wore a patch as a kid and I was bullied. He's like, you wore a patch and you were bullied as a kid? I'm like, yeah, it was a pretty horrible time for that year. He's like, man, I was bullied. I'm like, what? You were bullied? Like Alan Jackson? He's like, grade 9, high school in Hamilton, worst year of my life. Like ruthlessly bullied the whole year. I'm like, no kidding. So we sort of we're like, okay, parking lot that, but interesting. So flash forward, we start working on this design. It's not called Don't Poke the Bear at this point. Okay. There's like it's like Vaughn. Right. Vaughn is from in German and it was like from Canada. That was sort of like kind of the placeholder.
Okay.
But the artwork we started driving on, all the stuff you see now. Daniel, who's the winemaker and label designer, comes over from Spain. We're like 3 days from press, like to print these labels and get going. And we're at dinner having pizza. And I don't know how the conversation came up and what I needed to get to say this, but I was like, yeah, Daniel, you don't want to poke the bear. and he goes, what? I go, yeah, I don't want to poke the bear. Don't poke the bear. He's like, what is that? What are you talking about? He's French born.
Right.
From Lyon.
He has no clue.
And he's living in Spain.
Right.
He speaks English as a 3rd language. And he's like, that's the name of the wine. I'm like, what? He's like, that's what you should call the wine.
And he obviously, did he ask for an explanation on what?
Oh yeah. Don't what the expression is, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Well, I love it because I have these guys, and I keep bringing Clyde up because he's just came with us. How long you been with us now for, Clyde? 3 months? 2 months, we're always saying these sayings and these expressions. Like, what the hell does that mean? And it's kind of cool because it makes us think as well, right? So continue. So you say, don't poke the bear.
So, and he literally was like, that's a way better name than what we have here. Like, we gotta stop the press and let me go back to the guys in Spain. I'll get them to
and we're gonna call the wine, don't poke the bear.
Yep, that was it. And so then they sent literally the next day. It's at this point, it's all done except that name. So they swap out the name, they put don't poke the bear on, and they misspell don't. Because they're Spanish and they just quick fly like done.
Sure.
And so I get it. I'm like, whoa, there's a big spelling mistake on there. That's kind of really weird. But then I'm like, actually, we're from Ontario. It's calling it Ontario. You're in a room of 5,000 bottles of wine. Yeah. You want to stop someone in the aisle, spell it wrong. They're going to be like, what the? Is that right? Even if you can stop someone for 1 second.
Yes.
So and then 5 minutes later, he's like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Here's the correct spelling. We're like, no. We're going to run with that. If you look at the back label, we changed the back copy and inserted a line saying, it's basically this defiant Canadian bear. But
Got it.
I'll put the apostrophe wherever I like.
Oh, I love that.
And put friends first and bullies in their place. So
I'm just going to quickly read this out. I am a true Canadian bear. I am polite until poked. In brackets, sorry. I don't check from behind. I put friends first, put bullies in their place, and put the apostrophe wherever I'd like. And I am straightforward and real in all that I do, just like the pure local grapes that roar from this bottle. Yes. I love this.
Yes.
I didn't even read this, like when I picked it up.
Yep.
And it's funny with the don't, right? Because obviously with the Ontario, but there's, I think there's something that it doesn't matter where you put the middle of the words, the letters in a word, our brain is quite good at just still picking up on what the word is. But wow, all these little mistakes.
Complete fluke mistakes that got us to where we are. And even the bullying piece, Alan and I talked about it. We went to the LCBO. We're like, okay, we're ready to pitch them on this new brand. Alan's like, this is the vision on the wine side. Here's the label. And they're like, okay, this is all great. And then we're like, Alan and I were bullied as kids, and we don't know how to articulate this yet because we hadn't even produced the wine yet because we're pitching it. And, but we want to find a way to latch onto that cause because it's actually quite important for both of us. And I don't know, within 5 seconds, the buyer starts crying. I'm like, oh my God, what did I just say? What did I just completely screwed up? And she wipes the tears away. She's like, honestly, my daughter's being bullied right now at school and it's eating me alive. And it's crushing her soul right now. And I just hate it. I just love that you two guys who were bullied and yet have come out in a good spot with your lives and your partnership, and there is a way out of it. There's something to come out of it. And she's like, you're literally wiping some tears away. She's like, you got to do something with it. I don't know what the answer is, but do something with it. And we're like, okay. So that's why it's on the back copy. We sort of evolved there. And then we're like, okay, we're kind of winemakers, but how do we help, right? So let's raise money from the proceeds of the wine. But then what? If we're in Toronto and we find out that a school's got bullying, do we write a check to $500 for someone who can come in and be a guest speaker? Well, 100%. If we can do that, great. But we want more horsepower behind us. We need to find someone that can help. And so our charity of choice, and has been for 6 or 7 years now, is the Kids Help Phone, who do an unbelievable job right across Canada helping kids. And it's not exclusive to bullying by any means. Bullying is one of many things that can happen to put a kid in a position they have to call Kids Help Phone.
Yeah.
For us, I think now collectively we've raised over $250,000 for them, with them.
Congratulations.
And I have to say that's one of the great achievements for both of us, to do that. I'm a sales guy. Yeah. I've been forever. Yeah. Usually it's like, hey, if you buy this, we'll do that for you, right? Always a quid pro quo.
Sure.
I remember sitting in their boardroom and saying, we're going to do this. We're a new company and we're going to make a 3-year commitment for $75,000. I was like, that was a lot of money. I'm like, what if we go to business between now and then? What?
Sure.
Here's the entrepreneur's brain. Like, oh God. Oh,
$75,000 is a lot of money,
right? We don't know if we're going to be relevant.
We haven't sold a bottle
yet. Right? So we make that commitment. They're like, well, what do you want from us? And we just looked at each other and then looked at them and said, nothing. Just do your thing. Just make sure it gets used in a good way to help. And man, that felt good.
Well, congratulations to you, your team, to your partners, to everyone involved. I mean, those are huge numbers. And I personally the truth is, like, I don't really spend a lot of time in the aisles of El Cibio in the wine section, but I would definitely stop. Are they all different colors, or is it always the white has the white, like the teal aqua kind of thing, and then this is the red always?
The red, and then we have a rosé that has a pink one.
Okay.
And then we have a new reserve Baco Noir. Baco Noir is the grape I was talking about earlier.
Okay.
It's 100% Baco, and it's got sort of that Canadian trucker check, the red black check on it.
Okay.
So that's pretty neat. We have a bag and box, so a 3-liter version of the red, and then a couple of ciders as well.
And when did the ciders come into the mix?
A couple years later, probably 2019, 2020. Okay. And Alan had been making cider at Labatt / the wine company at Brights. And so for him, he was like, yeah, I can, if you think there's a route there. And it was a bit of a step out, right? We were making wine. We had really nice traction. Ontario makes unbelievable cider.
Right.
And so he's like, yeah, I think we can do it. So we went down that road and came up with that as well. So
I love it. Fun. All right. So where do we start? The red or the white?
Well, let's start with the white. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Beautiful.
Let me get your glass first.
And
team, please grab some. I don't know if we have. I know we have 2 other wine glasses that we're going to bring here to try the red. Whatever else we have there, I'll make sure that you guys test this out. Bo, you going to join us today, or you are? All right, that's my boy. Well, so what is the proper way to taste this? It smells really good. It's very fruity.
Very fruity, right? Yep.
Wow.
Very fruity. Right way to taste. I mean, that's such a long story. You can spend hours here, but really what you just did is spot on, right? You're smelling in the glass. You're trying to get a sense for what you're about to get into. First smell, you said it, fruity, right? Then you might swirl the glass around because that'll heighten the aromas coming out of the glass. Right? It might become even more intense.
I don't know if this is the right thing to say, like in terms of if it makes sense, but it smells light to me, which for me is something that I like.
Yep.
All right.
Light, fruity, refreshing.
Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you for having me. Are you kidding me? I appreciate it,
man. Salud. And cheers to the crew.
Cheers.
Ooh, I'm not just saying this, Andrew. I'm not, I don't try to like impress people by complimenting them just for the hell of it, because I don't know what that really does. Bless you, by the way, Bo. This is very nice. It's light.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I like. Maybe some people like it a little bit more, a little heavier, but crew, yes, please, 100%.
Get into it.
And then we're going to get into that red as well. So for 2024, what's you asked me the question off air, and I appreciate you asking. And I mentioned to you that for me, it's doing a lot more of how we ended 2023 in terms of trusting the process. Let's go back to basics. 2023 for both of my organizations, the real estate company, Andrew, as well as the coaching company for real estate professionals. I mean, we took a big hit. 2023, the real estate market in general took a hit. And so when people are not buying, selling, and investing, maybe not the best idea from Jas. My second business is also tied to the same market, right? Agents are not wanting to get coached and trained. I personally think, and maybe I'm a little biased, I think that's the time that you actually invest into yourself, but that's just me. I reminded myself at the end of 2023 that I'm going to go back to the fundamentals, the basics. We're going to put on educational events, in-person and webinars. We're going to do more podcasts. We're going to make more phone calls telling people about our concierge service, which is like a free service that our clients get in terms of if they need a plumber or electrician or whatever it is around their house. It's our way of staying in touch with them, like full transparency. And then when they think of real estate, hopefully they think of REC Canada. We're just going to make more of those phone calls. So that's us in 2024. What about you professionally as well as personally?
Alan,
I really like this.
Dude, thank you. I appreciate
Guys,
that.
like, I'm not just saying this. You at least test it. And if you don't like it, let me know and I'll buy you the bottle.
Not everybody will like the wine. That is like, winemakers have very thick skin. If someone says I don't really like it, like that's totally cool. Because this wine is a certain way, but you make a lot of that's fine.
Just before I go back to you, Andrew, I just want to, like, what do you guys think? Really? You're a wine dude, Clyde.
Should it be colder?
It could be colder for sure.
And
if it was like a few degrees colder, the smell, the aromas would change completely. Oh yeah. It's really cool to go different temperatures.
Well, what we are going to do is we're going to take it back to the office and put it in the fridge.
There you go.
But do not give any to Laura because she's going to finish it. We know you, Alto.
What's the white? What grape are we doing?
So there's always a blend in these. So these are 100% local to Ontario. VQA is a stamp we put on the back of the label to show that it is 100% from here and made to our local specifications. In the white blend, you'll often have Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and Vidal. Okay. On the red, Cabernet, Baco Noir. And now Alan, vintage to vintage will play and add in a different grape, because he'll try like 9, 10, 12 different varietals and then just start putting them together. 20% here, 4%, 2%, 3. Like it, don't like it, take notes, next one. And he's just trying it all the way, putting it all
90%, 95% he probably doesn't like, right? I would think.
Or just like, hey, this is really good, but I added 4% Vidal. It's a white grape. And all of a sudden, the fruity notes popped. That one little hit of 4% popped up, the fruitiness or the aroma, or just rounded it out a little bit, whatever it might be. It's so cool to see him play with that. And then honestly, we never tell this story, but he lives in wine country. I live in Toronto. Sometimes it's just too hard to go to him and try it, right? Sure. So he's like, I'll just send you my last 3, my top 3 choices. And I'll receive 3 like plastic Coke bottles, label off, true story. Yeah. True story. Label off. Yeah. Coke, Coke thing on top. And I'm like, I remember asking him like, what's with the Coke bottles? Yeah. And he's like, what's the deal, fancy pants? Like, do you need me to ship it in glass?
What'd you get all bougie?
Yeah. And he's like, it's food grade. I cleaned it. It's safer than anything. Yeah. It won't break in transit. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm like, God, that's like a perfect Alan story, right? Like, just, you don't need to do that, buddy.
Right.
I was like, right. Yeah. So he'll send the 3. It's like, what do you think? And he won't even tell me what the blends are.
Right.
And then you try, and then I'll provide my feedback. He's like, yeah, we're aligned. Or, I think, okay, maybe we'll bring a little bit over that over here.
Sure.
It's just artwork for him.
I love it.
It's so cool.
I love it. What would you pair this with, the white?
We probably, everyone's different, but we're in the winter now, but like a salad, a Caesar salad, there's some creaminess in the Caesar dressing. So you get a lot of acidity in Ontario, right? Grapes start with lots of acidity and no sugar. As they ripen, the sugar goes up, the acid comes down, but we're a cooler climate. So that acid, going against the Caesar dressing or chicken, beautiful choice. Sushi would be great, but
whatever, shrimp, like some shrimp cocktail.
Shrimp cocktail, love it. Yeah.
That's usually my thing with wine. Like, and I agree with you, Clyde. I do like it a little bit more chilled as well. But this is, kind of room temperature-ish. Yeah. We had it in the fridge for a little bit just before I brought it here. But amazing. We're going to try the red. Continue. 2024.
So we've gone, I think our first vintage, we thought we would sell 3,000 cases.
Okay.
Split equally between white and red.
Okay, 3,000 cases.
Yeah, so cases of 12, that's a 9-liter case. Yep. So I thought, Alan, we'll do 3,000 cases. In the first year, we launched Don't Poke the Bear. And I think we sold 3,000 cases in 6 weeks. Holy shit. It just hit. And it's different, right? Like, there's a freaking bear on it with a patch. It's like, what the frick is this? Not for everyone.
100%.
But, a lot of people pick it up and they look at the back label and they did what you did, was like, that's pretty funny. Like that speaks to me as a Canadian. Like 100%. And the fellow that helped us with this, I'll shout out to Jim DiOrio. He's a writer, and he helped us write all the back copy and just worked at it until we got to this. So Jim, thumbs up on that work. But we've gone from 3,000 cases, 2 wines. Okay. Now we're at like 6 or 7 SKUs, and we're producing 60,000 cases a year with no winery, no vineyards, no orchard.
Can I just take that if you don't mind? Thank you.
And no physical building. So we are asset light. We do not have capital tied up in that. We focus on making the wine. And honestly, it's Alan and I. My wife, Natalie, has her own business, but helps with all the social media. And that's kind of it.
Wow.
Like, that's it. That is Generations Wines Company.
So hang on, when you get orders, who fulfills is that you fulfilling the orders?
We fulfill the orders.
Okay.
We have a bookkeeper, right? Neil Goodis, who doesn't live too far from here. He's the nicest guy. Okay. And he started as an accountant and just was accounting. And he's like, you're always busy, Andrew. And you're like, an hour after we get a PO, then you're getting to it. I'm on my computer. Let me help with that. I'm like, okay. And then he's like, let me order the dry goods, like the caps and the bottles. Like, I'll take care of that. He's an accountant, but he's such a beautiful person. Yeah. He just started doing that. And now he's like, Alan, we're, down to the last 500 cases of cider. We got to produce more. So it's a very small team. We have a wonderful distributor that helps us, in the stores across the province, and another distributor out west. But Generations Wine Company is Alan and I. We don't take a salary. We don't have a building. We hardly have an office. So when we're talking to you, this means the world to us, honestly. And for us to be able to talk about Kids Help Phone and what we're doing, that is 24. We just feel like, hey, we're making good wine. Yeah. We're on the right track. We're small, but to talk about what we do, that point of difference, that social.
Oh, I love it.
That's what if I did anything this year, just talking about not even the wine, just what we're doing and who we're doing it for, go check out Kids Help Phone and see what they're doing and the money they're raising. It's just right to the chest.
We love sharing people's stories. I said it to you off air as well. This podcast has now become a little bit more selfish than selfless from the perspective of I just want to know, I want to learn more. Yeah. I want to get better. And there were so many things you said today that made me think, okay, you know what, we could do a little bit better there. We could do something a little differently, as well as maybe we're on the right track. My God, Andrew and Alan are doing this. They went from 3,000 cases. I mean, you're doing 60,000 in a year. That's huge.
It's actually,
you got to picture
both of them. Alan's made millions of cases in his previous life at Vincor, but 60,000 with no facility and no vineyard, it's a big number. And maybe the biggest number within the world of, we would call a virtual winery. So we're a winery with a license, but we don't have a winery. I think probably now, if you looked at it, it'd be the biggest brand that exists in Ontario in that fashion. So it's really neat what we've created.
I'm telling you, my wife's a big wine drinker. We're obviously going to finish these bottles on the table within the next, I'm sure, 2-3 hours. So I'm not bringing these home. But I will support you, only because I like you and your story. With the white wine, I actually like the taste of it. Yeah, we're about to find out what we think about the red.
All right. Go time.
Okay. So let me get your glass here. Yep. And so again, tell us, great question from the crowd here, in terms of grapes and stuff. Tell us a little bit about the backstory of the red here.
Yep. So always a blend. Okay. Again, a blend is from Ontario. It's a VQA. In this case, there's going to be 2 or 3 different grapes in here. You've got Cabernet Sauvignon, which typically doesn't do that well in Ontario. Cabernet Sauvignon needs a lot of heat to get ripe. Okay. If it doesn't get ripe, it tastes like a bell pepper. It can be kind of green. That's, some people love that. But generally speaking, who we're trying to make wine for, which is just the everyday hardworking Canadian. Honestly, I know that sounds very high strokes, but that's what it is. It's $15.
No, but it's true, because it's 50. Great question, because I forgot. I actually sent a team member to grab this for me because I was running. I didn't want to run late to get started. Yeah. I wasn't sure how much. Both are $15 each. For $15, I actually thought it was probably $21, $22.
What that compliment for Alan would be, for him,
let him know
the greatest statement.
Yeah, I felt this was a $21 to $22 kind of bottle of wine, right? So I'm not sure what that means, but obviously it resonated with you.
So now, and Baco Noir is the other.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Continue.
Baco Noir is the other grape in there. We love Baco because it grows really, really well in Ontario. Even in a cold winter, it'll sustain that winter and then provide a really good, healthy crop for us.
How many grapes are there?
Oh my God. In the world, in Italy, there's thousands of different grapes.
Holy shit.
Thousands, in the world, probably there's 5 or 10 doing 80% of all.
So when I go to the grocery store, I see 2 or 3. Yeah. They give us. That's all. You're telling me there's thousands of types of it.
It's really wine is intimidating as all hell. 100%. I love this talk because it's really down to earth and what wine should be. And the average consumer might know Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Cabernet, Merlot, Pinot Noir. That, you're covering the big dogs there.
Right.
You're pretty good. But there are literally thousands of grapes out there in the world. And then clones within that, right? A real wine geek would say, that's Merlot, but that's clone 32A, I can tell. That's next level, right?
In terms of wine geeks and wine nerds, could you smell some wines and say, this is the grapes in it?
Yeah.
Are you at that place?
I did my sommelier degree in 2001.
Okay.
And that was seriously hard work. I couldn't possibly do it right now because I'm not trained up and I'm in an arena with 4 kids, not tasting wine all the time. But I did it, and that was a major accomplishment. To get your sommelier degree.
What's the process? Is it Like a long process?
It was a year.
Okay.
It was a year, and I was working full time, and then it
Okay.
was one class a week all day. And then I started almost from behind the eight ball because I was with guys that were at the Royal York as wine stewards. Like they knew their game upside and down. I was like, I'm so far behind these guys. Going back to the family store, like I got to work my ass off and work harder than them to just level up. And the failure rate is like 80%. Like whatever it
People
was.
get started and they don't finish?
No, they don't pass.
Got it.
There's 5 segments in the exam.
Okay.
And you need to pass all 5 sections to pass and get your paper.
And what is it like is it a written?
There's like an essay, there's a true false, there's a service one.
Okay.
Like I worked in a restaurant for one little spot, but as a dishwasher, not serving. So I actually had to like, hey, how are you? What would you like? Welcome to the restaurant. It's all processed. It's like 99 steps in sequence. And if you miss it, you're getting a mark docked. And if you try to circle back, you're going to go down. It's really hard. And they'll say like, what should we drink tonight? We're having the steak. And it's like, you have to role play the whole thing.
Sure.
And it's really intimidating.
Well, yeah, from a consumer's perspective or somebody who goes to a restaurant, I'm asking those questions.
Of course, you want to know right there.
I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yep. So there's that. And then the hard one is the tasting, right? You've got I remember 19 glasses of alcohol in front of you. Wine, red wine, white wine. A couple of them are intentionally faulted. So corked, oxidized, whatever. And you have to know that. Because if you're saw them in a restaurant, my wine's corked, like you got to know, yes, no. And then there were spirits in there too. So, and you've got a fixed amount of time.
Okay.
So I think it was like 3 minutes. I think the average was like 3 minutes per wine or liquid.
Right.
You had to get the region, so country, region, grape, vintage, producer to get a perfect score on that wine. Right. Getting the producer is next level, right?
Right. Like producers, like geographically speaking, or
no,
is it
saying like, oh, well, that's it's from Ontario. It's a white blend, 2021, made by Allen. Don't poke the bear.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be a perfect score.
Right.
And there are people out there
that get that.
That can do that.
Oh wow.
And they're just so fun to watch. Getting
that's insane.
To me, getting producer is like such a deep dive of knowledge. It's off the charts. But you should be able to know, like, I'm smelling something from France. It's probably from that region, which means it's probably that grape. Looking at the color, it's probably like 2019. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. And you have to go with your gut. Just say like, that's what I'm putting down.
Got it.
And then you leave the exam and you're like, that's 6th wine. What was it? They're like, oh, it was a French Pinot. Like, fuck. Oh, I didn't know. And you're like, and then you find out later that you were right and they were wrong. You're like, yes. It's pain. It's torture. It's torture.
Again, looks light.
Yep.
Then lighter, I should say, than other red wines that I've partook in. Again, not as fruity as the white.
Not as fruity. Nope.
Am I right?
Plummy, like I would say, like plummy, a little bit softer on the nose.
Plummy.
Yeah, there's something about it. It's just like some red berry fruit, something like that. Pretty round on the mouth, like not tart. It's not super dry. It's not sweet either.
For me personally, I can't really handle dry.
Yep.
Thoughts?
I'm finishing the white, so I need to.
Oh, now you're gonna try the red. Okay.
I've done a little bit of wine tasting.
Good.
In my house.
Very good. Very
So
good.
of course, I'm looking here at the color.
Yep.
Color is gorgeous. Not completely
Gorgeous, it is.
opaque, just a little bit.
Yep.
I see legs.
Mhm.
So I like that. Again, it's not too dry, not hard. I want to say tannins.
Yep.
Is the right word?
Yep.
So when I'm drinking it, I mean, if it's really dry or a lot of tannins, it's like you feel it dry, like dehydrated.
It puckers your mouth, right?
Yeah.
You got it.
But when I'm drinking this, I'm like, it's like the perfect starter wine.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know you mentioned it earlier where it's like, it's not like food. You don't just eat it, right?
Yeah.
You have to play around with the different. I would definitely recommend a blend is always the best way to introduce a wine to someone. But when I'm drinking this, it's a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, it can be dangerous.
It could be dangerous.
It's-
I'm actually very excited for your rosé.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it
Rosé, like, there's a lot of people, we're talking very openly here, like, there's a lot of people that don't like Ontario wine and have that bias, that stigma against it.
because it's just
My dad didn't drink it, or I tried 3 and didn't like it, and that can happen in any country in the world.
Yeah.
But to me, rosé is like, can be very safe and down the middle. You can make it, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. This is a sweeping statement, and the real wine geeks and wineries be like, "You're wrong. What are you talking about?" Of course it does, but like, rosé can be safe. Like you can make it safe and appealing to many, many people. Pure red, if someone's a California cab fan and wants a 15% heavy hitter, you're not going to get that in Ontario.
Right.
We're just maybe one in vintage and 10, you're going to get that.
Right.
So don't try to hang your hat on it. Hang your hat on lighter weight, mid-range, maybe drier reds and stuff. So just own what you're good at. And that's back to a customer.
That. I love that.
Just own your space, right? Like don't try to be everything to everyone. Zero in on that and hit it.
Your vibe will always attract your tribe in so many ways. And wine's, I guess, the same type of business in that sense. Andrew, how do people do more with the Kids Help phone?
So
Kids Help line.
That's a great question.
You like, I want you to, you have the open platform.
Yeah. Thank you. They have a very meaningful campaign on the go right now called Feel Out Loud. They're raising money across the country. They're well on their way to their target. It's a huge, multi-million-dollar target. This is, hundreds of millions. I would encourage you to go to their website, learn more about what they're doing.
Okay.
Not surprisingly, during COVID, the call rates went through the roof and everyone's isolated. So then they had to figure out how to let people call in anonymously to someone who's going to help at their home. So they need funding to help hire more people, to continue investing in their platform so that now they can text, they can hit social media, they can call in all anonymously. They have an incredible understanding of what people might call in to help, looking for help for. Are you in immediate danger? Yes, no. There's a lot of cases where they're talking to someone who might commit suicide right there on the line, because they were bullied or because they're in a tough part, whatever it is. There's so many stories. So, Kids Help Phone is an amazing group. They're growing. They're respected internationally. And this campaign is just over the top. So highly recommend getting to their website and seeing that. And we just feel blessed to be working with them, almost one way, like, hey, like I said, please, whatever we can do, if we can do more, we'll do more. But like whatever you can do to take this and run with it, fantastic.
The team will make sure all the links for not only Kids Helpline is in the description, as well as where should people, obviously you can get it from the liquor store, but they want to know a little bit more about Don't Poke the Bear. Where's the spot? Like where should they go?
Yeah, we have our website. So, on our website, you can find us there. Don't Poke the Bear. Instagram is a pretty good spot. We're very small. Yeah. So I wish I had like a beautiful platform that we could sing from the rooftops.
I think it's actually the ones that are going to do better. Right? Yes. It's like this back, the story in the back, right? Yep. That's what people are going to fall in love with. Like, I can't wait to showcase this, not to the world even, just to my family and friends. Yep. They are going to love this story, not only because the majority of us are Canadians. It's just, I know everyone has a story of being bullied or maybe they did the bullying, and those people.
I've met a lot of people who are like, I feel terrible.
Exactly.
I learned from it and I would never do it again. Like, that's a beautiful thing too.
100%, right? Because now they've heard stories of how it affected people who got bullied. They realized that they were the bully. Sure. And this whole story of like, I just, I put friends first, people are going to love this. And so in terms of being like small, I think that's what's actually going to work in 2024 is the storytelling, not the necessarily like, hey, look at me, all the awards I've won stuff. It's going to be the storytelling. And you guys, yourself and Alan and Natalie and I forget the bookkeeper's name. Neil. Yep. Big shout out to Neil.
Neil's the man.
We can't do much. Like we can't do anything without bookkeepers.
Honestly, everything starts with the books, right? he keeps us in check.
Show me your books.
Guys, you can't do that.
You can't do it. Exactly.
Nice try, but you can't.
Big shout out to Neil. Those stories is what I think are gonna actually connect with people, and so Instagram and the website.
That's a really good place to start. Again, we don't have a huge platform, and it's just authentic. It's kind of like it'd be really nice to have a huge platform and a team that does it, but that's not who we are.
Exactly, it's very similar to
maybe
us.
Someday we'll get help to do that, but 100%. Right now this is us.
That's it,
and this is making this so wonderful for us to just be able to talk. I appreciate it.
Personally, for me, brother, you and I did not even speak before.
Nope.
You came here today, and I feel personally like I gained a new friend hearing your stories. Likewise, and I hope that you feel the same. I hope that we get to do this again. I bring on people for the second and third time all the time because I want to know, like, hey, what happened since you came here the last time, 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. So thank you so much for not only everything that you're doing with Kids Helpline, but also doing for the country. I actually think this messaging needs to be heard more often and more consistently, and you're doing your part. So thank you so much, and thank you for being on the Jas Takhar Podcast.
I really appreciate you making
today.
time to do that.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you
I
to
appreciate
your colleagues as well. Thank you.
100%.
Appreciate it.
They had some wine today, so they're happy.
That makes it easier
during
definitely.
work hours. So,
I'm gonna go take a nap.
and there you go. And I'm not going to say anything because I never do.
There you go.
I love you guys. I love you,
I
man.
love you too. And we love you too, Andrew.
All right, right back at you guys. Thank you.
brother.
Appreciate
Thank you
it
so
very
much. Big shout out to Natalie for still alive as well, for putting this
Yes,
together.
thank you.
Without her, we wouldn't have been talking
That
today.
is
buddy.
100% true.
100%.
Respect.
And that girl, Laura, whoever she is. We throw her under the bus all the time.
As it should be, right?
Because I get thrown under the bus way more than all of them. Right. That was awesome, buddy.